Spirituality has become one of the most powerful social currencies of our time. In a world that is increasingly hollow, anxious, and disconnected, the identity of a spiritual person carries enormous value. It communicates depth, awareness, and access to something beyond the ordinary. And because that communication is so valuable, a growing number of people have learned to wear it without doing any of the actual work it is supposed to represent, making genuine seeking harder, genuine teachers less visible, and genuine connection between conscious people far more difficult to find. In this video, we are going to break down exactly why this happens, what it looks like from the outside, and what is actually driving it from the inside. Part 1. Why people fake psychologically. Fake spirituality almost never begins as a conscious decision to deceive anyone. It begins with a genuine encounter with something real. Maybe a person goes through a painful breakup, and in that pain, they pick up a book about consciousness that completely changes how they see themselves. Maybe they try meditation for the first time and feel a stillness they have never experienced before. Maybe a loss or a crisis strips away everything familiar, and for the first time, they feel something deeper underneath the surface of their ordinary life. Whatever the trigger is, something authentic gets touched, and that feeling is real. But then the ego intercepts it, and what happens next is where everything changes. Instead of allowing that genuine experience to slowly and uncomfortably transform the person from the inside, the ego takes the language, the vocabulary, the aesthetic, and the posture of that experience and builds an identity around it. Suddenly, the person is posting about consciousness on social media, speaking about awakening in conversations, surrounding themselves with crystals and spiritual books, and presenting an image to the world that says, "I am a spiritual person," without the actual internal work that those words are supposed to represent. This is the psychological root of fake spirituality. The ego using the appearance of transformation as a substitute for the actual experience of it. And the reason it happens so easily is that the performance feels almost identical to the real thing in the beginning. The social rewards come quickly. People respond. The community validates. The identity feels meaningful. And by the time the gap between the performance and the genuine experience becomes visible, the person is already too invested in the image to want to examine it honestly. Part 2. What drives someone to perform spirituality? Underneath the performance, there are always specific psychological drivers that make it feel necessary, and understanding them is what separates judgment from genuine insight. The first is the need for belonging. Spiritual communities offer a sense of connection, meaning, and shared identity that is deeply appealing to someone who feels lost or disconnected in their ordinary life. Think of a person who never quite fit into mainstream social circles, who always felt like an outsider at work or with their family, and who suddenly discovers a community of people speaking about consciousness, love, and awareness. The relief of finally belonging somewhere is so powerful that they will unconsciously learn to perform whatever that community rewards most visibly: the right language, the right posture, the right values, just to stay inside that feeling of being accepted. The second driver is the need for a sense of superiority without the weight of real accountability. Spiritual identity offers a socially acceptable way to feel elevated above others. The spiritual person can look at the people around them with compassion, which underneath is often a quiet form of condescension dressed in softer language, without ever having to turn that same examination back onto themselves. The identity provides the feeling of being above the crowd, without requiring the genuine internal work that real elevation demands. The third driver is perhaps the most subtle and the most common: the need to avoid genuine self-confrontation. Real spirituality eventually forces a person to sit with themselves completely and honestly, facing every unresolved wound, every hidden pattern, every uncomfortable truth about who they actually are beneath the image they project. A person who picks up meditation, attends retreats, reads spiritual books, and builds a community around their seeking can feel like they are doing all of that confrontation while actually using all of that activity as a sophisticated and socially rewarded way of avoiding it entirely. Part 3. The specific behaviors that expose a fake spiritual person. The gap between performed and genuine spirituality always reveals itself eventually, and it reveals itself in the same ways every time. The first is how they respond to being challenged. Imagine someone in a spiritual community who speaks constantly about acceptance and non-judgment, but the moment someone questions their perspective or disagrees with something they said publicly, a subtle coldness enters the interaction. The warmth that was so visible before quietly disappears. They might respond with a spiritual-sounding explanation for why the other person simply does not understand yet, or they withdraw their energy entirely. Their peace was never real peace. It was a performance that functioned only as long as their image remained unthreatened. The second is the gap between their public and private self. A person performing spirituality is warm, present, and conscious in visible social contexts, but significantly different behind closed doors. The patience they display publicly disappears in their closest relationships. The unconditional love they speak about openly does not show up consistently with the people who actually live with them or know them most intimately. And those people, the ones closest to them, always know the truth even when they cannot articulate it clearly. The third is their relationship with spiritual status. A genuine spiritual person is almost entirely uninterested in being seen as spiritual, because the internal reality of it is enough. A fake spiritual person tracks recognition constantly. They notice who respects them, who sees them, who validates their depth. Their social media is carefully curated to project an image of consciousness rather than to share genuine insight. And the difference between those two motivations, even when the content looks identical, is always felt by the people receiving it. The fourth is what happens when life gets genuinely difficult. Performed spirituality collapses under real pressure, the way a structure built on sand collapses when the tide comes in. When something truly painful or destabilizing enters the fake spiritual person's life, the framework built around the performance crumbles quickly, because it was never built on anything real underneath it. Genuine spirituality deepens under pressure. It does not perform better under difficulty. It simply holds. Closing. The most confronting thing about this topic is not recognizing it in other people. It is sitting with the possibility of recognizing it in yourself. Because the line between genuine seeking and performance is not always obvious from the inside. Think about it honestly. How much of what you do around spirituality is driven by a genuine internal need to understand yourself more deeply? And how much of it is shaped by how it looks to the people around you? How much of it would you still do if nobody could ever see it, validate it, or respond to it in any way? Strip away everything you do publicly around spirituality, the conversations community, the identity, the aesthetics. Only what remains in the silence, when none of that is present, is real. You should ask yourself, is there a genuine practice underneath all of it? That answer is the only one that actually matters for a real spiritual path.